Were they puppets? Were they broken human beings? Or were they truly deranged maniacs? I'm not sure it's possible to put each individual member under the same bubble. What we do know is Marik Ishtar and his band of rare hunters, or ghouls in the Japanese version, brought terror and evil to the Battle City tournament hosted by Kaiba Corporation in Season 2 of Duel Monsters. The rare hunters can be best described as a cult, and as per the case with almost every cult, there is usually one leader, one mastermind, one person each member views as holy and godlike. At the top of this rare hunters movement was Marik Ishtar, a man who was constantly on the verge of insanity thanks to his other half Yami Marik constantly knocking on the door, waiting to engulf any good that Marik had left in him. Before the hunters were formed, Yami Marik was able to show himself in the real world, albeit for a short while. During a struggle with his dad, Yami Marik acquired control of Marik. This led to the brutal slaughtering of his father, and after Marik awakened to the aftermath, his destiny was set, and the rare hunters would be formed in the very near future. Before we proceed, it's important to understand the difference when it comes to the Rare Hunters title in terms of the English dub and the Japanese version and manga. In the dub, the Rare Hunters were all of the shadowy, creepy figures that assist Marik, even the ones that are faceless. In the original version, the main group formed by Marik are called ghouls, with the Rare Hunters being a subsection of the ghouls. In the original, the Rare Hunters were members of the ghouls that would actually duel and be combative. The Battle City Rare Hunters are the ones we will be focusing on the most in this video, but before we get to them, let's dive into a little backstory. Marik would command the ghouls to assist him in obtaining the 3 Egyptian god cards, Ra, Slifer, and Obelisk. Marik failed in this mission, only thanks to the intervention of his sister, Ishizu. This set the stage for the Battle City tournament to take place, as Ishizu would use this card to sway Seto Kaiba into hosting the tournament. This was the tournament where Marik's rare hunters would inflict chaos onto Yugi and his friends. I always found it really ironic. The reason that these hunters were able to show their face and be so destructive is because these same rare hunters and ghouls failed in their original mission. Had they succeeded in acquiring Obelisk, Battle City never happens. A classic snowball effect indeed. But Battle City does of course happen, and Marik's best dueling ghouls would be tasked with the mission to defeat Yugi and further collect rare cards from duelists at the event. I think the term ghouls is a fitting name to refer to these thieves. A ghoul is an evil spirit or phantom that is supposed to rob graves and feed on dead bodies. While these ghouls aren't necessarily grave robbers, their main objective is to defeat a duelist or simply steal their most valuable and rarest trading cards. So I actually love the perfect name Kazuki Takahashi picked for this group. There are a few rare hunters that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Bandit Keith was the first of the combative ghouls, albeit only in the anime and not in the manga. He runs off with Yugi's Millennium Puzzle at the start of Season 2 and plays the role that Duke Devlin's father played in the manga. After Keith is defeated, this is when we are first introduced to Marik. Marik is able to take control of Keith's body and speak through him thanks to the power of the Millennium Rod. Keith is seen fleeing out of the warehouse and is seemingly gone for good. The next rare hunter we meet is one without name, called Rare Hunter in the original, Seeker in the English dub, and simply Exodia Rare Hunter by many fans. He is the first true rare hunter that we are introduced to in the story. We see this rare hunter along with some other lower ranking ghouls ambush Joey Wheeler and force him into a duel. It is during this duel that the rare hunter is able to summon Exodia, leading Joey to an automatic loss. The rare hunter then mercilessly takes Joey's Red Eyes Black Dragon card while the other ghouls physically assault him. Joey was able to recognize this rare hunter the next day, despite the fact that he was no longer wearing his rare hunter garb. Yugi overhears the conversation between Joey and Seeker and decides to step in, wagering his beloved Dark Magician for a chance to duel the rare hunter that assaulted his best friend. As is the case for most opponents, the Exodia Rare Hunter's early tricks and strategies become see-through, as Yugi is able to realize the goal of the Rare Hunter is to summon Exodia. The Rare Hunter loses to Yugi, who then tears up his Exodia cards, since they are completely fake. The Exodia Rare Hunter begins to plead for forgiveness to an unknown being before being possessed by Marik, much like Bandit Keith was. Once Marik speaks through this Rare Hunter to Yugi, the Exodia Rare Hunter is seemingly gone for good. You'll notice an early theme here with these hunters. After they have become worthless to Marik, they seem to meet a pretty grim fate, which I will get more into later on. Our next rare hunter is the wicked magician Pandora, or Arcana in the dub. Whether you want to call him a desperate, unfortunate, broken-hearted man or a twisted, disturbed individual is completely up to you. Pandora plays a magician deck similarly to Yugi's, which makes this one of the most mirrored, fun duels in the entire anime. Although the stakes are a bit extreme, the loser will have their legs cut off by a chainsaw. Pandora easily has the most fleshed out and tragic story of all the rare hunters. Once a famed and beloved magician, Pandora was living his dream. He had the perfect job, a job that he absolutely loved, and an incredible romance with a beautiful woman named Catherine. This ideal life would unfortunately not last. Pandora was involved in a bad accident while performing, due to one of his escape tricks failing. The face that brought Pandora so much glory and fame was destroyed, and thanks to his superficial outlook on life, so was his career. Pandora began obsessing over how he no longer had looks, which led to his lover leaving him. By the time Pandora realized he had nothing left, no fame, no love, he began to seriously consider ending his life. This is when Marik swooped in. Marik promised Pandora that he would be able to restore love and beauty into his life once again. Marik told him Catherine would come back to his side as long as he joined the Rare Hunters and successfully killed Yugimoto. This false promise was enough to get another dueling mercenary under Marik's control. Pandora would go on to lose against Yugi, and thus another rare hunter was defeated by the King of Games. Pandora's fate would slightly differ depending on which version you are discussing. In the manga, Marik claims he will re-trigger the suicidal thoughts before the two met, implying Pandora will in fact end his own life shortly after he wakes up. In the anime, Pandora believes that Catherine is a mannequin that Marik used to control him, an unnerving fate no matter which iteration you refer to. The next rare hunter was a lifeless man, a man that was ultimately crucial in Marik's plans, as he was able to do anything he pleaded without much convincing through this vessel. The man I am referring to is Strings. Some of you may know him as Doll, but whichever version you are discussing, his real name is unknown. Perhaps his name is unimportant, as Strings is responsible for committing one of the most heinous acts out of all the rare hunters. The story of this mime is much more sinister than most of you are aware. According to Marik, Strings murdered his own parents. Despite having the ability to kill the people who raised him, this act caused him to become overwhelmed with guilt. Strings sealed his consciousness away after committing this heinous act. The mime became a completely emotionless human, if you could even call this murderer a human anymore. He was a perfect pawn in Marik's game, as he was able to easily control his will with absolutely no resistance. It's important to note that Strings' story in the anime, both original and English dub, is a bit different than this, as Marik claims he was able to easily manipulate Strings due to his weak mind. Regardless, the character of Strings is ultimately irrelevant, as he has no free will at any point during the on-screen story of the show. Marik planted the doll in Battle City, where he stayed stationary for 2 whole days, much to the amusement of the passing citizens. When Marik felt it was time to utilize Strings, he did, sending him to Yugi's locations in the hopes of defeating him in a duel and ultimately getting his pawn to murder the Pharaoh, much like he did to his parents in the past. Even with the help of Slifer the Sky Dragon, this seemingly invincible duo was unable to overcome Yugi, and Strings was never seen or heard from again. Another rare hunter had fallen by the wayside. Marik was starting to get desperate. He had just seen 3 of his top hunters taken down by Yugi back to back to back. This is when he decided to go after the people most dear to Yugi. He ordered his nameless lower-ranking goons to kidnap Taya, Joey, Tristan, and Mokuba. While this was happening, Marik was planning the next move with his final 2 rare hunter mercenaries, Loomis and Umbra, simply known as Mask of Light and Mask of Darkness in the original version. Little is known about these characters' backstories, but we can infer that the 2 of them had a very strong bond with one another. Not only did their masks have a symbolic balance with each other, but they were the only 2 tag team duo within the ranks of the hunters. The 2 masked men challenged Yugi and Kaiba to a tag team duel, which took place on top of a building. If a duelist's life points reached 0, Loomis and Umbra rigged the panels below them with explosives, which will send a duelist plummeting 1,300 feet to their death. The two masks did not lack in the brutality stakes that Pandora and Strings also had set up during their duels with Yugi. Umber was the first to lose his life points. However, deceitfulness was a major trait of the Rare Hunters, and so it was to no one's surprise when he deployed a parachute secretly equipped to him, which saved his life. Loomis, at the sight of seeing his partner almost die, surrendered. Unfortunately for Loomis, when you join a cult, you are in it to the end. Marik took over the body of Loomis to talk to Yugi and Kaiba before leaving Loomis lifeless at the top of the roof. The Mask of Light and the Mask of Darkness were never to be seen or heard from again. Marik decided to pull one last trick before the Battle City quarterfinals began. He set up Yugi for a duel that he could not possibly win. Marik enslaved his best friend Joey Wheeler and used Joey to duel Yugi in a duel that would ultimately see the loser dragged to the bottom of the ocean via an anchor. Joey was able to break Marik's mind control due to the bond him and Yugi had, and thanks to Serenity Wheeler's bravery, neither of them died and Marik's plans were foiled yet again. Imagine yourself in Marik's shoes during this. You hire a team of skilled duelists who are willing to go as far as kill themselves to bring down Yugi. You also have members of your cult that you are able to fully control, giving you the opportunity to put on somebody else's skin while staying hidden within the shadows. You even have the advantage of holding 2 Egyptian god cards, but then you have to witness turn after turn, battle after battle, duel after duel. Your team of mercenaries begin to crumble away one by one until the only 2 left standing are yourself and your longtime right-hand man, Odion. That was the unfortunate predicament that Marik Ishtar had to face. His Rare Hunters had completely failed, and now the only thing that could stop Yugi was the mastermind himself. Well, and also Odion or Rashid in the original version, and Odion's story is where our story turns to next. As a baby, Odion was abandoned in the desert, left to die by his original parents. He was taken in by the parents of Marik. The treatment he received was vastly different between the 2 parents. Mrs. Ishtar treated Odion with love and affection as if he was her actual child, while Mr. Ishtar treated him with disdain, viewing him only as a tool that could serve the next Tome Keeper, which was to be his natural-born son. Before Marik was born, Mrs. Ishtar pleaded with Mr. Ishtar to allow Odion to become the Tomb Keeper, something Odion greatly desired. However, when Odion was about to turn 12, Marik Ishtar was born. The promise of becoming the Tome Keeper was stripped from Odion. Mr. Ishtar immediately declared his son of true blood would get the honor. Even though Marik and Odion grew up as close siblings, Odion could never get over the jealousy and resentment he felt towards his younger brother for being the true heir of the Tome Keeper. A scene that is removed from the dub is a scene that shows the demons Odion was battling at the time. After Marik falls ill due to a cobra bite, Odion takes a dagger into Marik's room, ready to kill him in his sleep. When Marik utters the word brother, Odion drops his weapon, stunned that Marik actually views him as a brother and not just a servant. Almost all of Odion's resentment and hatred towards Marik immediately dissipated. Odion becomes incredibly loyal to Marik, promising never to leave his side, even going as far as using a knife to carve the Tome Keeper hieroglyphics on his face. One fateful day, Marik and his sister Ishizu leave to go to the surface, which is strictly prohibited. Odion stays behind and tries to cover up for them, but is severely beaten when Mr. Ishtar realizes they are gone. Marik and Ishizu return, horrified at the sight of Odion being beaten senselessly by their father. This released one of the most vicious entities in the world, a counter-personality known as Yami Marik. Yami Marik killed Mr. Ishtar in brutal fashion, and when Odion awakened, he saw the bloody scene and immediately put 2 and 2 together. When Marik awakened, he had no memory of what happened. Odion told Marik Shadi killed his father, which ultimately set Marik on a journey to kill the Pharaoh. Odion has a loyalty to Marik that is unrivaled, even posing as Marik during the Battle City quarterfinals to try and lure any suspicion off the real Marik. Odion steps up to face Joey Wheeler in the quarters and ends up drawing the Egyptian god card Ra. While Odion does not want to use it, Marik implores him to, as Yugi and Co. began growing suspicious of Marik's true identity. Marik even promised Odion that using it would prove his worthiness to the gods and to the Tome Keepers, a fate that Odion so desperately wanted. After hearing this, Odion summoned the god card. However, the Winged Dragon of Ra was a fake, which struck both duelists and rendered Odion unconscious. This allowed one of the most wicked spirits to manifest itself in the world permanently. With Odion no longer to protect Marik, Yami Marik was able to overpower him and maintain control for the remainder of Battle City. Marik's team had failed. The Rare Hunters completely botched their attempt to defeat and ultimately kill the Pharaoh. Odion's fall was symbolic in so many different ways. It was essentially the final member of the Rare Hunters failing to fulfill their duty. At the thought of the entire effort failing, Marik could no longer hang on to the small sanity that he had within. The overwhelming feeling of his hand-picked group failing the mission, along with his stepbrother succumbing to the circumstances, was too much for him to handle. Yami Marik was released. Yami Marik ended up losing to Yami Yugi in the finals, thanks to Marik regaining control and surrendering due to Odion's awakening. When Marik banished Yami Marik from his being, he no longer held a grudge towards the Pharaoh, and with the cult leader gone and almost all of his staff decimated, the Rare Hunters officially were disbanded after the Battle City tournament. But what did become of the Rare Hunters that dueled Yugi? Well, the anime seems to give us a quite grim answer to that question. In Season 4, Yami Yugi enters the Stone Wilderness in search for Yugi. This is a place where lost souls wander. It is safe to assume that everyone who appears in this valley is no longer living. That can be assumed because we see the soul of Yami Marik, who we know is no longer among the living. As Yami traverses, we see the souls of Seeker, Pandora, and Bandit Keith. Out of these three, we know that Pandora was the closest to death, as he was on the verge of suicide before his run-in with Marik. I believe these three Rare Hunters are dead. The fate of Strings, Umbra, and Loomis all remain to be unknown. It could very well that Marik eliminated these three much like he did to the first three Rare Hunters after their failures, but that will always be up for interpretation. Regardless, the Rare Hunters were one of the most vicious and brutal groups in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. However, even the malicious group was no match for the dark powers within Yugi, and I think that always has to be noted when reflecting back on this group. They all have their own backstories and desires, strategies and characteristics, but ultimately, the Rare Hunters failed. They were a failed group derived by a man clinging on to a small sliver of sanity, and for as quickly as they rose into Battle City, they were defeated just as quickly, no longer serving a use for Marik Ishtar. And that, my friends, is the history of the Rare Hunters. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope the video was informative. I hope you learned something that maybe you forgot when you were watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, or maybe you didn't know because you've only read the manga or only watched the English dub or vice versa. Regardless, I hope you learned something new, and I hope you did enjoy the video. If any of you are familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, I've done a History of the Dark Signers video, so you're more than welcome to check that out. I would definitely appreciate it. And ultimately, thank you guys for watching. Let me know your favorite Rare Hunters and your favorite moments from Battle City down below. A special thank you to my Platinum tier patrons, Jorge Carrillo, Horace Maye, Goosey Q, Smith620, Blue Maiden 28, Panther J, Vincent Van Der Veen, Nero, Jarrett Buller, and Aura Dragon, and to my Diamond tier patrons, Jesse Wood, Latrell Smith, and Pegasus Seiya, and to my Egyptian God tier patron, Syn Cloud. Thank you to everyone who is a patron and a channel member. I would not be able to do it without all of you, so thank you for your support, and thank you to everyone who just watches my videos, because without you guys, I definitely would not be able to do any of this. Thank you again so much for watching. I will talk to you down below, and I hope you have an amazing day.